subjected. And from hearing it from them directly, I was not left in any shadow of a doubt that they'd actually discovered the deposits of the Keteris. Unfortunately, the Israel Department of Antiquities today is still trying to claim it's simply earth or dust that they found. So the Keteris, the incense, has this tremendous power, and it's the completion and the conclusion of the whole service, and that's why we end our prayer service with the Pidyon Keteris after Ein Kelokeinu at the end of the morning davening. And with that, I'd like to begin to conclude my presentation tonight and invite your comments and your questions. I'd just like to go back again to the verse which I read to you from Yechezkel's prophecy, together with the Midrash Tanchuma, which is printed at on the first page inside the front cover of the book, the verse about learning the form of the temple. And when we do this, we are actually considered by God that we're engaged in building it. And with that having said, I'd like to conclude just by mentioning the well-known controversy about whether the temple is built by God or by man, the coming temple. And there are different opinions that are brought between Rashi and Tosfos, a whole discussion about it. And Romchal tells us that the temple will actually extend down from Shemayim, and it will take physical form in the Beis HaMikdash. Now, I don't know what that means. What I would like to say is that I believe very strongly that the way that the Beis HaMikdash comes down from Shemayim is when you and me take an interest in it, and we take an interest in the form of the Beis HaMikdash and what it means. And I can think of no single subject that will bring more bracha, real blessing, into the life of everyone who is willing to just get more Beis HaMikdash consciousness. I could end with a very personal story. The first time that I was ever zocher to be in Uman for Reb Nachman's Rosh Hashanah was in the year 1988. That was the first year since the 1930s that it had been possible to hold a Rosh Hashanah in Uman. Under the communist era, until 1988, there was no Rosh Hashanah in Uman, although in the 1980s people were beginning to go there. In the year 1988, unlike the 15,000, 20,000 people who now flock to Uman for this annual event, there were just 250 people. This was at the very end of the communist era, 2.5 to 3 years before the communist regime actually fell in Russia. Things were already breaking apart, although we didn't yet know it. The very fact that we were allowed that year by in-tourists to go to Uman after paying colossal bribes. I mean, in that year, every individual who traveled from Israel paid $2,500. This is 20 years ago. Enormous price to pay for the most crazy circumstances in which this Rosh Hashanah took place. It looked like a London Blitz scene. There were people lying on blankets in the corridor of this crummy hotel. It was really an army barracks. The bathrooms were indescribable. The crowd, the Russians gave us area for 250 people to daven for Rosh Hashanah bouts. From there to where the bima begins, we're all crowded in there. I had my 6-year-old son there with me because of Reb Nachman's promise, what happened to who will bring a boy to him before the age of 7, and the conditions were intolerable, and I could barely imagine how I was going to spend the hours standing. There were no seats. Nobody had thought to rise with chairs. And the breast of Rosh Hashanah is very long, and something that morning of the first day of Rosh Hashanah got into my head. Here I am, I'm broken and tired and beyond tiredness, but I've come all the way to the Reb Nachman of Breslov, who is really the source of faith and the power of prayer. So just this morning I'll do one thing that I never ever do. I'll say the Korbanos. Somebody put it in my head, say the Korbanos that morning, and I read the Korbanos, and came the afternoon of Rosh Hashanah Mincha time. Well, I did it this morning, I'm going to do it this afternoon. And the next morning, I'm going to do it. And there was a chazaka, and this changed my entire life, the bracha of reciting the Korbanos. This was the very first preparation back in 1988, which was followed a few years later by learning Mishnah Torah, where you learn all of the laws of the temple, all of the sacrificial laws. I started that in 1994, and it was a couple of years later that I found the Mishkanei Elyon, which was the crown because it tells you the real ultimate goal of history. It is the perfect mandala for collective healing, for personal healing. It is the embodiment in stone of the Kedusha, or Kodesh Baruch Hu, a revelation of God's Shalom, God's Menucha, that we should be worthy very soon. It will come about when you and Eve get into this book and learn it and tell people about it. There is also now Rabbi Chaim Chlorfin in Tzfat has not only produced a model of the future temple as opposed to the known models of the earlier temples. He's made one in Tzfat that you can go visit of the future temple, and has recently published a beautiful edition of the relevant chapters of Yechezkel with pictures of the third temple. And so through interesting ourselves in this subject, let us be ready for Erev Rosh Chodesh Tammuz, and for entering the month when we, through our focus on the temple, we will see it. Rav Nachman said that if enough people focus their thoughts on one and the same thing, they can make it happen. Where to start? So, David, you've done the most to bring this about. You deserve that the first question.
I can ask 3 quick questions.
3.
And very quick. Why is song Gevurah? Why does Rabbi Nachman? What did Rabbi Nachman say about bringing a child before 7? I never heard that. And what is your next project in a book?
What was the first question?
The first one is why song Gevurah?
Why song Gevurah? Well, you can understand that if you think about how when we start singing, it's so heavy and hard, and you've got to start the nigun and get into it. You know, when they begin in the Shlomo Minyan, the first nigun in the morning, I was there at 9:30 on Shabbos, I said, what's going on? It takes Gevurah to get it going, because you've got this heavy wind and heavy ruach, you've got to make move. And so that's why his song, very briefly, comes from the side of Gevurah. Why bring the boy to Reb Nachman before the age of 7? Well, he said it, and that's enough for one of his followers. I don't know the specific reason. He specifically said that if the boy comes in before the age of 7, he will protect him from the impurity of Keri until he gets to the chuppah. And certainly you do see the very pure, tamimus children of the breast of Hasidim who have are really brought up in the Kedusha v'Tahara, who do have this great bracha from the Rebbe. My next project, well, I don't like public talking about what I'm going to do, because there's something called Ayin Ra, an obstacle, so we don't talk about it too much, but I do very much feel that now, as I spoke on Shabbos, and I've said numerous times while I've been here, now is the time for Am Yisrael to get up and Safru Kavod Bagoyim, to speak about what the Torah says to the Gentiles of the world, not just in general nice cushy cozy terms, but tachlis, how they can help us to do our true national purpose, because I believe that we're not going to get anywhere with the Eruv Rav in control, and that what we have to do is to create a grassroots ideological shift, where just like in the Middle Ages, the world shifted from Middle Ages to Renaissance to Enlightenment, so the world is going to shift from the present day extreme galus, fake simcha, to the future true simcha. And the only way we can do this is by allying ourselves with the righteous Gentiles. And to find them, we have to talk about it publicly.